On some real basic level, we need to answer some questions. Why is land, like we're looking at, that will grow 80 different crops of commercial significance, with Mother Nature providing the water, why is that land worth $10,000 an acre? And the same land, if you're going to put a Krispy Kreme or a McDonald's on it, is worth $1 million an acre. We have to answer that question as a society. I would suggest we're valuing things poorly.
As some of these peri-urban areas have developed, other organizations, golf courses, soccer fields, others have been able to soak up the water rights and has left a lot less for the actual farmers.
This farm originally did not have irrigation, and so we needed to develop irrigation on it and irrigation rights. It's ironic that the state has the phrase that they use all the time called highest and best use, and on numerous occasions come back and said that water usage to grow food is not the highest and best use.
We have a lot of conflicts in Western Washington between salmon recovery and farming, and I think it's a false dichotomy, but we're just not thinking creatively enough.
When we built an awning over the back of our barn to keep shade on the vegetables we've been washing there, we got an email from the county a couple days later because they saw it on a satellite image.
One of the most beneficial things the county has done to help us is to have an ordinance that allows roadside markets and temporary structures for farmers to start out. Just things like that, if people could encourage counties to do things like that are a loophole for farmers to get started, that makes a really, really big difference. I would just say be involved with like Farm Bureau and get to know the other farmers in the area, and if there's a direct farm marketing association, get involved in that.
I think the more farmers that can band together and utilize an organization to have that bigger voice, the more powerful farmers can be in the state. That has a huge impact economically.
So I'm involved in a couple committees that are addressing legislation and that we bring up also racial equity issues with about who's accessing finances and accessing this land.
I think there's some support coming systemically from the county that I personally have seen, but I know there's lots of different competing interests within politics of the county, of the state, of the city.
Developers call, realtors call. Yes, we've seen that pressure.
The growth boundary in Clark County is just one street to the south here, and that's going to be something that we have to think about, because light industrial, they're talking about rezoning some of this land that way.
In terms of policy and supporting all peri-urban agriculture, I think it's very important for community governments to understand the value of this community agriculture and to really push against development pressure.
One of the key aspects is how well has farmland been valued and preserved, especially from a policy standpoint. In cities that have farmland that's surrounding them, it's extremely tempting to develop on because it's flat, it's well drained already, it's in a grid pattern just like a city wants, and it just adds to this whole issue. Some of the benefits of keeping farms and farmland viable on the urban fringe are that it helps keep green space open, and it keeps it open in a unique way. It's not just preserved, but these are actually working lands that are producing money that's going into the economy and are in turn helping other industries, other businesses. It's not a boom economy. This is something that can return to the community in perpetuum over time. Urban populations have a unique chance to get connected directly with where food comes from. And for some people, this is a really important aspect, especially if they've grown up in the city and it's someplace where they might not necessarily feel like they fit in, they feel like something is missing. That kind of experience is going to help bring those people to a place where they might be the next generation of farmers.
I think telling that story and connecting with people about what's really going on is just it's kind of just too much. Like you can't really, it's like even trying to answer this question, where to even begin to talk about what it means to organize your life around natural systems rather than a 9-to-5 and a commute. We're the weirdos, because we're not in a farm community.
Some of the biggest challenges I'm feeling currently about 6 years into this are the lack of a network of farmers around us.
In the times where I've tried to enter into community here as a farmer in this area, things like joining the Grange or these other kind of long-standing community leadership groups. There are really entrenched dynamics around race, gender, and class. We have a different vision for what that type of community or that relationship and kinship can be.
We're only 2% of the population. In certain areas, there's no farmers. You go to big cities and you won't find any farmers there, but yet they all say, yeah, I like supporting local. It's just something that I feel that we're really underrepresented by ourselves. In the 50s, there was so many more farms here. About 10 years ago, we were down 75% of the farms and farmland in our county. And so it's just funny because there's so much less of it, but yet we get blamed for everything. Water pollution, this, that, and the other thing. And we do so many great things. But there again, we don't talk enough, and the people that are coming out with these new regulations don't really do the deep dive and find out, okay, so how's this gonna affect this person? And that's where we're really behind the 8 ball, because we're so independent and not everybody has time to go down on their computer and search what bills are coming up, what bills have passed. No one has that type of time, especially a farmer.
I think we're busy trying to just maintain.
Totally.
Farmers are busy, they're hard folks to organize. And if you're a farmer trying to organize farmers, it's probably better to donate to someone who isn't a farmer and is an advocate, because are you really going to be calling people up in July trying to organize around a legislative session? Probably not.
You get into farming and it becomes so all-encompassing. And I really think that taking that step back and making sure that you're making time to contribute to your community, do some things that are bigger than just making sure your lettuce gets weeded is incredibly important. That's a thing that we all struggle with, but I would say as we've gotten more mature as a farm, we have made time for all of that stuff.
That's kind of what it's all about. If it isn't for farmers helping farmers, who else is going to help us? So it's kind of it can be a real community of farmers in an area. It may not be that way everywhere, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't become that. I know a lot of neighbor farms to me have helped me out a lot, and they don't see me as a threat or a competition. There's plenty of people to sell to, and so if I have the opportunity to help somebody else, I sure wouldn't hesitate to do it.
We get together every year, we discuss, we come up with new ideas, we glean things from other growers, also to glean ideas of what not to do. That's always the other side, is there are some topics that come up and you go, boy, we will learn from our friend, don't ever do this. And that group has been fantastic.
I think it's just really deeply ingrained in our culture to not cooperate, because even if you just tried to work together with another farm, you're sort of showing your hand a little bit, and I think people don't feel really confident about doing that.
And I think it sort of comes down to changing your mindset about whether you're a cutthroat in competition with your neighbors or whether you're actually all on the same team and you can be better together. We got invited a number of years ago to go to this really amazing sort of underground farmer-to-farmer convention. And then we were we can do that here. And we just had all the farmers that we knew, we sort of sent out an email and we're hey, let's just talk. Anybody can do it, you all sort of get better together as a community.
Our goal is to develop more farmers. I think the U.S. has had a lot of pressure against having farmers of color for the last couple hundred years, and so we're trying to reverse that by introducing young folks to farming. We also have quite a number of partnerships with a lot of the other farmers of color in the city and peri-urban areas. And so we're able to leverage those partnerships, share resources, share information, get our questions answered. It's become quite a community.
That's one of the things that we're very, very blessed with here in the Valley, is this kind of ability to, even though we compete nose to nose on land rent and supplies and everything else, we work together on research and economic development with WSU and with all the players to make sure that there's a healthy, viable agricultural infrastructure in place. Our port district here in Skagit is the only port district that I'm aware of in the state that puts money directly into agricultural research. And they put money into the research unit at WSU, and then they work together to try and enhance agriculture. $1.5 million were raised by the local ag community. That's pretty remarkable. Skagit County has a very active farmland preservation organization, a couple of them actually. We also have a conservation futures program, which currently has preserved over 12,000 acres of this valley in permanent agricultural easement. And that land can't be developed. Then you don't have these price differentials pushing. Well, there's an issue right now where a car dealer wants to step over the line. Well, if the highest and best use of this prime farmland is to store cars on, you know, it's pretty obvious they just want to wiggle around the door and turn it into $10 a square foot ground.
I think we need to be really intentional about how we zone property and treat it. Land is a finite resource. I know it feels infinite to a lot of people, but it is highly finite. And we just can't go all willy-nilly on how we zone it.
So often people don't understand that we need a good land use plan if we're going to have viable agriculture, because agriculture is such a long-term business. You know, we don't have but just a limited amount of good farmland available. And I've always felt that I don't want to ruin, I don't want to leave my children with something less than what I had. One of the things I have been a very vocal advocate of is transfer of development rights. That if we had a transfer of development rights that left land out here that is available for agricultural and food production operations, we could do wonders with it.
So I was talking about this with one of my employees, I think yesterday, that, you know, if my son or my daughter were ever want to farm here, they may well be hemmed in entirely by subdivisions. It's working its way that way, but it hasn't yet, and that is thanks to Oregon's land use laws.
The county we live in does an awful lot to preserve ag. Since the late 70s, they've been buying up and preserving land. Well, that's what this farm is, our other main farm. All this promotional stuff to try to save land for farming and try to promote farmers. But then you have the state turns around and it's like they don't even, and we're the biggest county here in our state. And so it's just odd how they just don't talk.
It's interesting to be in King County where county and municipal government does hold a lot of agriculturally zoned and productive land, but unfortunately it's really, really difficult to get into a situation of leasing or having access to land through the county.
I think there's a need to place land into community land trusts, into like agricultural land trusts, into situations that take it off the market and allow for hopefully like the actual communities who are being served by agriculture to make choices about who is able to farm on the land and have that be made in a democratic way rather than leaving it up to the market. Because what the market is going to say is flip it for the highest value. Right now, that means that there's very few people who are able to invest in agriculture in the private sector, and those people are pension funds, those people are large foundations. It keeps us kind of locked out of being able to have that long-term security.
And I think the only way that you really can get food sovereignty is through ownership. And so we're looking at what farms are going to become available in the area, how much are they going to be? We know they're going to be expensive, but to start now in terms of trying to make a plan to be a player, to be able to actually purchase some. And so having partnerships with government organizations and nonprofit organizations and philanthropic organizations, I think is a way to really try to help support farmers. And now we're in a position to try to take advantage of some of these partnerships to expand our operation. And I think a lot of the governmental organizations see their history and are willing to support us in doing that. So I think we're in a good position now to try to make a move to counter some of the past injustices. Again, not looking for a handout, but looking for opportunities to be at the table. Farm loan programs have been very, very complicated and really geared toward large farms. And so I think policies around how do we create loan and grant structures and prioritize smaller spaces and family farmers on those smaller spaces, then I think we'll be able to create a much more rich and resilient food system.
It doesn't matter if you're a small grower, we're all growers. We all enjoy doing what we do. We're all just trying to make a living growing things and selling them. And I think there's been a lot of issues in the past where you have organics against conventional. And the problem that we just figured out a couple of years ago is we need to start branching out and meeting and aligning ourselves with people that we maybe don't align with so we can tell our story.
And we have to keep in mind that all farmers are important. Farming is diverse, just as diverse as the 300 different crops we grow in Washington State. Every farmer's operation is just as different as the crops that they grow.
And you won't find the rubber stamp one fits all.
Because it's regulation and because it needs to cover a lot more than just us, it is often hard to work with. We're not farming with combines and giant fields, and so it's sometimes hard to explain what we need to be able to farm. Many counties in Oregon rely a lot on agritourism, specifically around wineries. That is a carve-out that's specific to wineries and does not extend to vegetable producers. We can't have the same sort of events, farm dinners and that sort of stuff, without much more permitting and being allowed a lot fewer of them. And the reason is that Oregon is worried that allowing things like weddings and things like other large agritourism venues, that it's kind of like a slow encroachment on farmland. But the side effect of that is that small farms who are producing food and money that way don't have that extra income stream that can really help, especially now that climate change makes some years very hard, and it would be nice to have a kind of a backup income stream that wasn't as reliant on the weather. That is something that small farms would need the lobbying power of a winery to be able to do. Farming near a major urban center has opened up a lot of resources to us. Cooperative farming advocacy organizations and cooperative marketing organizations have been probably the most valuable. The advocacy organizations, just in the short time we've been farming, have made a difference in the things we can do legally as farmers. It makes a difference to our bottom line. It makes a difference to our ability to continue farming as a sustainable way of life.
I know that there's counties up north that have approached this. They have an agricultural ombudsman that is a direct advisor to the county councilors or commissioners staff, that when issues come up resolving around agriculture, they can give advice, they can put in input.
When I think long term about it, I do worry a lot about the pressure that will come to ag areas like ours, that's kind of this marginal ag land, but that has water. You know, what's gonna happen in 10 or 20 or 50 years when California is less of a breadbasket.
We're starting to dabble a lot more in dry farming techniques to accommodate climate change and urban sprawl and the demand that our population of humans have on our water systems. You know, we're even seeing more wildfires. So I joke a lot about, but it's not a joke so much as reality, is I put everything on wheels. The infrastructure expenses are so high, that capital demand is so high, I couldn't imagine what farmers went through this past summer, having to leave behind barns and storage containers in hopes that they don't burn down completely. That has to be so stressful and devastating to come back to.
I think more and more folks are thinking that they need to at least have some basis as close as possible. That a good, secure, robust, sustainable food system is important, and farming being the basis of that. In this area, if we have a big earthquake and we're shut off, you know, we're not going to be able to get food from across the country. And I think small peri-urban farms are going to be more resilient to climate change, small enough to shift, but also just keeping the green space so you're not having more and more heat islands, you know, in the city. And so the evaporation, transpiration from those areas can help cool spaces. I see we're getting a lot of support for agriculture. The city has a food plan. County, again, supporting us here. Cities seem to be the space where most innovation can happen on a more rapid level.
They are expanding and putting markets in new neighborhoods, and they're trying to go into diverse neighborhoods. There's some international farmers markets now, and laws that are changing, like one in New York State where there's a brewery law that gives advantage to those that are using local grains to distill and brew beer.
As producers who really understand the value chains that we're working within, we understand the market dynamics, I think there's some really important work to articulate how we approach community scale food production and food systems development.
An example of the latter would be something like forward contracting with public institutions, to be able to contract with a farmer to buy out their season and plan in advance what kinds of things are needed.
The ability to have a walk-in cooler in one room out of a 50,000 square foot health clinic.
But public institutions often don't have enough money to receive the kinds of products that they want, and small farmers don't have the ability to accept that much risk.
I just realized the other day I had done these food conversations, and I did 20 of them and talked to farmers in the US and in Italy, and asked them how it was going and how they were gonna pivot. And there were just some really extraordinary innovative ideas on how to continue forward and rethink things and really to support one another. And I feel like a lot of that came from young individuals and individuals that have had less access and had less representation in the farming community.
These more radical ideas about just making the whole system work better and providing people with some of their more basic needs, that's not a thing that ever gets talked about. That's not happening in the room. They're just accepting that these problems are out there and looking for these little ticky-tack solutions to them.
Right.
It's tough because I've been kind of on both sides of the policy world trying to quote-unquote help farmers, and most of us don't answer our email, we don't pick up the phone, and we don't go to meetings. And so I can understand somewhat from a bureaucrat's point of view how it might be kind of hard to figure out exactly what's needed. So I think that our job when we do show up for meetings like that is to just push the agenda aside. A lot of the reason that people leave a farming job is because they're just not making enough money and they can't afford healthcare. People love farming, and I just think we need something in place to help that be a career that's a long-term option for folks. And maybe if we just keep saying that in whatever venue, it won't seem so crazy anymore.